oh, I'm having a hard time not feeling like losing respect for you a little bit. I'm trying to be true.
What you are about to hear is a story that has been quietly unfolding away from the cameras, away from the polished, curated narratives presented to the public. A story pieced together from insider accounts, meticulous timeline analyses, and exclusive theories from sources close to the Brown family. A tale that must be approached with caution, as the claims are still unverified in the public domain. Yet the evidence as it has been presented forms a picture so extraordinary that it challenges everything previously believed about the dynamics of the sister wives and the very foundation of their collective legacy. For years, the cracks were visible to the attentive observer. The arguments, the tears, the slow, agonizing unraveling of a family built on a pluralistic ideal. Yet what many believe to be disputes born of personal favoritism and emotional neglect now appear, in retrospect, to have been the prelude to something far more calculated. A betrayal not merely of hearts, but of estates, of inheritances, of the material legacy painstakingly constructed over decades. A deception whose roots reach into legal maneuvers and financial subterfuge, and whose consequences, when laid bare, reveal a secret will presented in a court of law naming only Robyn and her children as heirs to the entirety of the Brown family fortune. A revelation compounded by a judge's ruling identifying it as part of a $2.8 million fraud, transforming what once seemed a family dispute into a legacy shattered and a patriarch cast as the architect of his own bloodline's disenfranchisement. To comprehend the full scope of this unfolding drama, one must trace back to the origins of the Brown family's public and private ethos, a principle of unity, a communal pooling of income and domestic labor. With Mary bringing in initial earnings, Janelle functioning as the steadfast high-earning workhorse who famously liquidated her retirement to sustain the family's needs, and Christine dedicating herself to caregiving and homemaking, enabling the operational freedom for Cody and Janelle alike. Each contribution, financial or domestic, intended to serve the collective. Their combined efforts invested in multiple properties in Las Vegas, through intricate arrangements of loans and bankruptcies. Their equity representing the future and the security of all 18 children. A tangible testament to decades of labor under the guise of spiritual, if not strictly legal, partnership. Yet, the first turning point came with Mary's divorce. Officially framed as a procedural necessity to enable Cody's legal marriage to Robyn for the adoption of her 3 children. An arrangement that, while publicly lauded as a noble sacrifice, reportedly marked the inception of a calculated strategy to shift assets. To legally sever the original 3 wives from financial claims, and consolidate control under Cody and Robyn. A maneuver which, following the divorce, transformed Mary, Janelle, and Christine into, in legal terms, long-term tenants rather than co-owners of a life they had collectively built, an act whose implications reverberated through subsequent acquisitions and business dealings. The unraveling began in earnest with Christine's departure, a move motivated by both emotional and financial necessity, as she sought to disentangle herself from a house in Flagstaff, delayed in its sale, and to secure her rightful share of the equity tied to Coyote Pass. Her attempts met with persistent stalling by Cody, prompting her to engage legal counsel in Utah to demand formal separation and precise accounting of her stake, initiating a chain of events that would expose a hidden layer of financial orchestration, a mislabeled PDF sent by a junior paralegal revealing the existence of the Solomon Trust, an estate planning vehicle into which shared family assets were being covertly transferred, including property, intellectual property rights, and brokerage accounts, none of which had been disclosed to the other 3 mothers. A revelation that instantly alerted Christine's attorney and marked the first crack in a long-concealed structure of deception. The discovery prompted immediate communication with Janelle, the pragmatic and financially astute family member, who, initially skeptical, soon grasped the gravity of the situation, recalling a history of financial inconsistencies, unexplained allocations, and the contrast between Cody and Robyn's apparent affluence and the constrained resources available to the other wives. A pattern of exclusion made explicit when Christine brought the document to Mary, setting the stage for a clandestine reunion of the original wives via video conference across 3 states, united not by affection but by shared purpose, each recounting instances of financial stonewalling, inequitable distribution, and the opaque handling of family resources, gradually assembling a coherent narrative of systematic disenfranchisement that extended to the children, who were now at risk of being effectively disinherited. In response, the 3 wives pooled their resources to engage legal and forensic expertise, launching a lawsuit under seal to avoid media scrutiny. seeking asset freezes and a full forensic accounting of Dabzark Entertainment and the family's finances from the legal marriage of Cody and Robyn onwards, employing a renowned forensic accountant whose 6-month investigation uncovered patterns of diversion and segregation, including the funneling of show income, intended for collective distribution, into an account controlled solely by Cody and Robyn, bypassing the other wives and children, with up to 70% of revenue allocated to private investments, real estate, and luxury expenditures, creating a parallel financial system invisible to those who had contributed to the generation of those funds. Further investigation revealed that the Coyote Pass land, while initially purchased collectively, had been quietly transferred into Cody's sole ownership and subsequently into the corporate entity Dabzark LLC, effectively stripping the original wives of legal claim to property they had funded and maintained, transforming them into tenants on their own long-cultivated legacy, a process exacerbated by undisclosed debts undertaken by Cody against the family's assets. A strategic encumbrance designed to further isolate and control the resources under his and Robyn's purview, revealing a pattern of asset concealment, covert control, and systematic erasure of both financial and personal agency from the other wives and their children. The forensic report further highlighted the deliberate structuring of the Solomon Trust, named after the youngest child, a legal entity unknown to Mary, Janelle, and Christine, designed to consolidate intellectual property, real estate, and financial instruments under Cody and Robyn's direct control, representing not only a financial coup, but a profound betrayal of familial trust, exposing the vulnerability of those who had assumed equality within the family covenant, and illustrating how legal and financial instruments had been manipulated to effect a transfer of wealth and influence away from those who had built the family's foundation. Throughout this process, correspondence, discovery requests, and legal motions revealed the meticulous orchestration of every step, from delayed property sales and misrepresented financial statements to strategic omissions and asset transfers, all of which coalesced into a singularly shocking revelation of premeditated exploitation and concealment, a narrative that transformed years of perceived domestic and emotional strife into a calculated campaign to marginalize and dispossess. A story in which personal loyalty and trust were weaponized in service of a financial objective, leaving the remaining wives and their children facing both the emotional and practical consequences of systematic disenfranchisement. The emerging picture, as painstakingly reconstructed from legal filings, insider testimonies, and forensic accounting, depicts a sophisticated operation of concealment, commingling, and redirection of funds, a multi-layered framework in which Cody and Robyn systematically appropriated resources for themselves, leaving the other wives financially and legally incapacitated, their past contributions recognized only insofar as they could be publicly acknowledged, while privately excluded from the growing accumulation of wealth. A betrayal that extends beyond simple financial misconduct to the fundamental redefinition of family structure, property rights, and the inheritance of the Brown legacy. Each revelation builds upon the last, from commingled show income funneled into private accounts, to the quiet acquisition and control of Coyote Pass, to the deliberate construction of the Solomon Trust, to the imposition of secret debts, creating a mosaic of strategic manipulation and exploitation, in which the original wives' agency, property, and expectations were methodically undermined, transforming years of shared endeavor into a tableau of exclusion, deception, and covert appropriation. Ultimately, this story is one of profound shock, exposing the intersection of familial loyalty, legal strategy, and financial ingenuity in a saga where the veneer of unity masked an intricate, premeditated transfer of power and wealth, a betrayal that redefines the narrative of the sister wives, casting previously assumed roles, relationships, and intentions in a dramatically altered light, and revealing how the convergence of emotional trust and legal authority can be exploited with devastating precision, leaving a family, its children, and its legacy hanging in the balance. An extraordinary tale of deception, discovery, and the painstaking unraveling of a life constructed under the pretense of equality. What you are about to hear is a story that has been quietly unfolding behind closed doors, far from the cameras and the meticulously curated public narrative. A story meticulously reconstructed from insider accounts, financial records, legal filings, and exclusive sources close to the Brown family, revealing a web of betrayal, manipulation, and calculated greed that challenges everything previously assumed about the sister wives and their supposed unity. For decades, the four wives had collectively contributed to the family's wealth, pooling resources, sweat, and savings into properties, businesses, and investments, believing in a shared vision of prosperity and security. Yet, unbeknownst to three of them, those funds were systematically siphoned off for personal use by Cody and Robyn, diverted into extravagant purchases, including vehicles and Robyn's ill-fated jewelry business. My sister-wife's closet, while the very land that Janelle lived on, scrimping and saving in an RV she thought would be her future home, was secretly leveraged for loans from which only Cody and Robyn benefited. A scheme of breathtaking audacity that privatized profits while socializing the losses and left Marie running her bed and breakfast, unaware that the family pot she relied upon was being drained. The revelation of this deception began with a forensic accountant's discovery, a report exceeding 200 pages, documenting a decade-long pattern of financial abuse, misappropriation, and strategic concealment. But the motive remained elusive until the trail led to an obscure, recurring bank fee in Flagstaff, a minor payment that, upon investigation, unveiled the existence of a safe deposit box belonging to Cody and Robyn, the contents of which would become the ultimate smoking gun, a professionally drafted, multi-page will known as the Solomon Will, naming Robyn as the sole executor and primary beneficiary, granting her complete control over all of Cody's assets, and explicitly disinheriting not only the 3 original wives, but 13 of his own children, with a contingency clause placing the estate in the Solomon Trust solely for the benefit of Robyn's children in the event of her predeceasing him, a revelation that exposed the motive for years of financial maneuvering, legal maneuvers, and marital restructuring, all designed to erase the original family from their own legacy. The audacity of this plan was compounded by a fatal error, a notarization dated March 17th that was invalid, performed by a notary whose commission had expired 6 months prior, coupled with irrefutable evidence from travel records and social media proving that Cody could not have been in Flagstaff to sign the document, transforming what was already an egregious act of familial betrayal into an incontrovertible legal fraud. The ensuing courtroom drama, conducted in a closed setting away from media scrutiny, saw Mary, Janelle, and Christine united with their legal team, a picture of measured resolve facing Cody and Robyn, who appeared isolated despite their proximity, their strategy rooted in emotion, deflection, and appeals to patriarchal authority, yet systematically dismantled by a methodical legal approach that followed the money, scrutinized the documents, and exposed the lies, with Cody's initial combative testimony portraying the Solomon Will as a draft designed to protect the younger children, crumbling under the precision of cross-examination that revealed the expired notary, falsified signatures, and documentary evidence of his absence, leaving him unable to justify the fraudulent document and revealing the deliberate, calculated nature of the financial and legal subterfuge, the commingling and diversion of income from the television show, funneled into private accounts under Cody and Robyn's exclusive control, the quiet appropriation of Coyote Pass land via quitclaim deeds transferring the wives' interests into corporate entities, the accumulation of undisclosed debt-leveraging family assets for personal gain, and the creation of the Solomon Trust as a vehicle to consolidate wealth and ensure control over the family's legacy. This pattern of systematic exclusion extended beyond financial manipulation to the erasure of legal and familial authority, turning the original wives into tenants on property they had funded, marginalizing their contributions, and jeopardizing the inheritance of 13 children while simultaneously enriching and empowering Robyn and her offspring, a revelation that reframed decades of domestic disputes, emotional grievances, and perceived favoritism as a calculated strategy designed to disinherit, disenfranchise, and consolidate power, revealing the fragility of trust, the potency of legal instruments in manipulating family dynamics, and the extraordinary lengths to which individuals will go to secure wealth and legacy. Each thread of the investigation, from mislabeled digital files to the meticulously documented safe deposit box, from forensic accounting reports to cross-referenced travel records, painted a comprehensive picture of deception, a tapestry of betrayal in which personal loyalty and familial bonds were weaponized in the service of private enrichment, and where the facade of unity masked the deliberate appropriation of assets, the concealment of income, and the orchestration of a legal and financial coup that left the original wives and their children emotionally, legally and financially disenfranchised, a revelation that redefined the narrative of the Brown family and exposed the sinister mechanics behind what had once appeared to be domestic and emotional disputes, now revealed as a masterclass in calculated familial exploitation, manipulation, and legacy theft, culminating in the courtroom confrontation where every claim, every transaction, and every manipulated legal instrument was laid bare, and where the moral and emotional consequences of decades of betrayal became undeniable, illustrating how wealth, power, and authority can be clandestinely manipulated under the guise of family, trust, and unity, leaving a legacy irrevocably altered. relationships fractured, and truths finally exposed in a dramatic saga of greed, deception, and the devastating consequences of calculated betrayal. In the hushed intensity of the courtroom, the air seemed thick enough to slice, as if justice itself had paused to listen. The prosecution had just revealed the digital records, bank charges, time-stamped and undeniable, from a restaurant in Lehi, Utah, dated the 17th of March. It was the exact same evening a notarized document, allegedly signed by the patriarch himself, had been processed in Flagstaff, Arizona, over 600 miles away. The contradiction was damning. The barrister's voice, measured yet lethal, cut through the silence. "Can you please explain to the court how you were dining in Lehi while simultaneously executing a legal document before a notary? An expired one, I might add, in Flagstaff?" The words hung like smoke, curling with accusation. The defendant, once a man who strutted through life with the air of divine right, sat frozen, his jaw tight, eyes darting towards his counsel, then his trembling wife. For once, his legendary bluster failed him. He opened his mouth, mumbled something incoherent about dates being muddled, but even he seemed unconvinced by the feeble excuse. The court saw it. The jury saw it. His empire of image and control had begun to crumble, the mask slipping to reveal something hollow and human beneath the polished facade. His wife, ever the portrait of fragile devotion, rose next. A tissue clutched in her hand, she took the stand with trembling grace, her eyes glistening under the sterile courtroom lights. Her voice, soft and tremulous, painted a picture of innocence, a devoted spouse, swept into complexity she could never understand. "I never wanted to cause trouble," she began, dabbing her eyes. "I simply fell in love. With him, with the family. I did everything that was asked of me. He managed the big matters, the finances. He told me we needed to secure the children's future. I trusted him. I didn't question, I just signed." Her tears fell at the perfect moments, her pauses almost theatrical, yet sincere enough to make a few in the gallery stir. She spoke of the other wives, the jealousy, the isolation, the bitter walls that rose when she tried to belong. "They make me sound like a thief," she whispered, voice cracking. "But everything I ever did was for the family. The house, it was meant to be a gathering place for us all. I never wanted luxury for myself. I only wanted safety for the children. It was a performance of exquisite vulnerability, a masterclass in weaponized innocence, and for a fleeting moment, it worked." But then came the cross-examination, calm as a scalpel, methodical as a surgeon's hand. "Mrs. Brown," began the opposing counsel, voice silky and composed, "you co-founded a business venture known as My Sister's Treasure, did you not? You were its creative director, responsible for operations, pricing, and inventory?" She nodded nervously. "Yes, but he made the big decisions." "Indeed," the barrister replied. "Yet the records show you were the registered agent and co-signatory of several accounts under the entity Dabsark, which accumulated several £1,000,000 in production income. You claim never to have looked at those bank statements?" She stammered. "I was busy with the children." The barrister smiled faintly, eyes glinting with precision. "So you, a seasoned businesswoman who oversaw branding, product, and revenue streams, expect this court to believe you had no knowledge, nor curiosity, about the flow of millions of pounds into an account bearing your own name and that of your children exclusively?" The silence that followed was electric. Her lower lip trembled, and she whispered, "He handled all that. I trusted him." But the counsel was unrelenting, pulling thread after thread until the tapestry of innocence unraveled completely. Bank statements appeared on the projector, showing the down payment for her sprawling estate traced directly to the secret account. Receipts for luxury items, limited edition art, and collector's jewelry. Each transaction another nail in the coffin of credibility. Her defense of naive obedience dissolved into something colder, willful ignorance. The choice not to ask questions because she liked the comfort of the answers she never sought. And then the final question struck like a dagger. "Mrs. Brown, you are named sole executor and beneficiary of this will. Your children alone stand to inherit. Did you ever once think to yourself, this isn't right? Did you ever say my husband is excluding 13 other children from their rightful legacy?" Her tears flowed anew, but they no longer softened the room. They gleamed like guilt. "I just wanted to feel secure," she whispered. "After everything from my first marriage, I just wanted to know my children would be safe." And there it was, the quiet confession, the motive unveiled. It was never about unity or misunderstanding. It was self-preservation disguised as loyalty. Her mask had slipped as completely as her husband's. When both sides rested, the barristers rose for their closing arguments. The defense painted their clients as victims of jealousy, claiming the case was a domestic dispute unfit for a court of law, a saga of scorned ex-wives exacting vengeance. The patriarch, they argued, had merely exercised his right to govern his estate, to provide for the wife who had remained true to him when others faltered. But when the plaintiff's counsel took the floor, the atmosphere shifted. No theatrics, no tears, just calm, deliberate truth. "This is not a family tragedy," he began, voice firm but measured. "This is a decade-long conspiracy cloaked in the language of love and faith. What began as a legal maneuver, a divorce and remarriage, evolved into a scheme of calculated fraud. It stripped 3 women and 13 children of their financial rights, their dignity, and their place in the legacy they helped build. This was not protection, it was plunder." He guided the jury through the evidence one last time. The money trail, the forged signatures, the deeds that transferred property without consent, the impossible will that gave everything to 2 and nothing to the rest. "Numbers don't lie," he said softly. "Bank statements do not possess emotion. A forged notary stamp does not hold grudges. What you've seen here is not a quarrel, it is theft. The theft of equity, the theft of legacy, the theft of faith itself. These defendants would have you believe this is about bitterness, but it is about betrayal, the kind that cannot be measured in money alone. For years, the Harper family had been the darling of reality television, their lives dissected and adored by millions who tuned in weekly to witness the chaos and charm of modern polygamy played out in the rolling deserts of Arizona. The patriarch, a man once admired for his charisma and conviction, had built a kingdom not of brick and mortar, but of cameras, contracts, and charisma. Each of his 4 wives had contributed in ways that went far beyond what the viewers ever saw: emotional labor, financial investment, and the constant sacrifice of privacy that came with living beneath the unrelenting gaze of the public eye. But beneath the smiles and slogans of family unity, there was a rot. Slow, deliberate, and deeply calculating. It began as many betrayals do with money. The family's accountant, a meticulous man whose loyalty had long been unquestioned, noticed strange transactions. Funds quietly siphoned from the joint equity accounts, assets transferred without explanation, and loans taken against the family's communal land that no one, save for the patriarch and his favored wife, seemed to know about. At first, it seemed a simple oversight, a mistake buried in the chaos of multiple businesses and overlapping incomes. Yet as the documents piled higher, a picture of staggering arrogance and deceit began to emerge. The equity built by all 4 wives, the hard-earned savings that represented decades of shared struggle, had been used not to uplift the collective family as promised, but to fund one woman's personal ventures, luxury vehicles, speculative investments, and an ill-fated boutique jewelry line that had once been touted as a joint family business but was, in truth, little more than a vanity project. The land itself, sacred to the wives who had once dreamt of building their forever homes upon it, was leveraged for secret loans they would one day be liable for. Imagine one wife, living in a cramped caravan upon that very soil, saving every penny to make her dream home a reality, while the ground beneath her was being quietly mortgaged away without her consent. Imagine another running her small bed and breakfast, proudly believing her earnings went towards a shared future, unaware that the collective account was being systematically drained to support the private empire of another. It was betrayal not just of trust, but of identity, of the very principles that had been preached from the family's carefully curated public image. When the truth began to surface, it came not through confession, but through a forensic audit, an independent investigation commissioned by the 3 wives who had long suspected that something was amiss. The report, a tome of over 200 pages, laid bare a decade-long pattern of misappropriation, shell companies, and false ledgers. It was in every sense financial treason. Yet even as the evidence mounted, there remained one elusive question: why? Why would a man who had once proclaimed that his family was his greatest treasure go to such extraordinary lengths to dismantle it from within? The answer arrived unexpectedly, tucked inside a seemingly insignificant clue: a small recurring payment from a hidden account, labeled simply as a safe storage fee. To most, it would have gone unnoticed, a trivial banking charge lost among the columns of figures. But to a forensic accountant trained to spot anomalies, it was a flashing beacon. The legal team for the 3 wives, now known privately among insiders as the OG3, subpoenaed the records tied to that payment, and what they uncovered would unravel everything. The payment corresponded to a safe deposit box held in the patriarch's name, co-owned by his legal wife. With a court order secured, the box was drilled open under strict supervision. Inside lay several folders, loose jewelry, and one sealed envelope from an estate planning firm, the same firm that had been accidentally referenced in an internal memo weeks earlier. The envelope, when opened, revealed a document that would later be referred to in hushed tones as the Solomon Will. It was not a draft or informal note. It was a fully notarized, multi-page testament that shattered the last remaining illusion of fairness. The will named the patriarch's legal wife as the sole executor of the entire estate, granting her absolute authority over every asset, property, and account upon his death. It further stipulated that 100% of all holdings, including intellectual property rights from the family's television ventures, would pass solely to her and her biological children. In the event of her predeceasing him, the estate would not revert to the collective family or the numerous children from other wives, but would instead be placed in a trust, managed, conveniently, by her sister for the exclusive benefit of her own offspring. The clause that followed, however, was the true dagger to the heart. It explicitly disinherited the remaining 13 children, those born of the other wives, stating that they had been adequately provided for during his lifetime and would receive no residual interest upon his passing. It was an act not just of exclusion, but of erasure, an attempt to rewrite history, to render invisible the very children whose laughter, heartbreaks, and milestones had built the family's fame. For those who had once shared his home, this revelation was nothing short of soul-shattering. Yet the arrogance of those who plotted the deception proved to be their undoing. A small but fatal detail would expose the entire scheme. The notary stamp upon the will bore the commission of an officer whose license had expired 6 months before the document's date. It was, in legal terms, a fraudulent notarization. Further investigation revealed an even more damning fact. Flight records and social media posts confirmed that on the very date of signing, the patriarch had been hundreds of miles away, attending a family gathering in another state. He could not have physically signed the document in the presence of that notary. The supposed last will and testament was therefore not merely immoral, it was a forgery. With this explosive evidence in hand, the matter escalated from civil litigation to a criminal investigation. The court proceedings were held privately, away from cameras and gossip columns, but those present would later describe scenes of high drama worthy of the very show that had once made them famous. On one side of the courtroom sat the 3 estranged wives, united by shared grief and quiet determination. On the other, the patriarch and his legal wife, outwardly poised but visibly crumbling beneath the weight of exposure. His defense relied on bluster, portraying himself as a misunderstood father merely seeking to protect his youngest children. It wasn't exclusion, he claimed. It was responsibility. He argued that the older children were independent, self-sufficient, and that the so-called will was merely a draft, a hypothetical exploration of estate planning. But when cross-examined, the facade collapsed. The opposing counsel, calm and surgical, presented each piece of evidence with chilling precision. "Is it standard practice, Mr. Harper," the barrister asked, "to have a draft will notarized by a lapsed notary on a day when you were not even within the same state?" The question hung in the air like a blade. The patriarch stammered, blamed clerical errors, and ultimately shifted responsibility to his legal wife, claiming she handled the paperwork. The courtroom, witnesses would later say, was silent but for the faint scratching of pens on paper, as every word was recorded for the record. The legal wife, when her turn came to testify, wept publicly, insisting that she had been acting under her husband's direction. But under questioning, her statements faltered, contradicted earlier depositions, and revealed inconsistencies so stark that even the judge raised an eyebrow. As the cross-examination continued, the courtroom's mood shifted from sympathy to disbelief, and finally to cold fury. The patriarch's empire, once held together by faith, image, and the illusion of moral leadership, was unraveling thread by thread. Witnesses from the production company were called to testify about contracts, residuals, and financial agreements. Internal memos surfaced showing that both he and his legal wife had attempted to renegotiate ownership of the show's intellectual